Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to be showcasing Mr. Fantastic on that special Connoisseur lane. Basically the nightmare lane vast majority of the community was complaining about, because even when you have really good counters you can only deal proper damage whilst throwing special attacks, and it still makes these fights quite a lot more annoying. Now, combining several Mystic Mutant teams with Captain America Infinity War Prowess synergy and using Mutant power boosts seems to be one of the best strategies. Obviously Quake still works here, and any passive damage outlet works as well. So you can use Omega Red, and that can be quite a bit tricky because of the cornered lane, and also this lane has clapback, so there are quite a bit of tricky things to keep in mind. But I figured out that we're going to try out full Fantastic Four synergy here with She-Hulk, and many people are going to be a bit confused as to why we are using Mr. Fantastic due to the nature of the nodes. Basically, Special Connoisseur node, which is present throughout the entire lane, says that we only deal 10% of our actual damage if we are not using a special attack whilst having prowess buff active. So even if you have a prowess buff active during all times, you can only deal your regular damage with your special attacks. But this node's technicality seems to be bypassed by all of the passive damage, such as Void, such as Omega Red, Mephisto, Quake, and a bunch more. So those are invaluable strategies. And the reason why Mr. Fantastic kind of comes to the aid so much here is due to additional nodes that we can exploit here. So first and foremost, Clapback works perfectly with Mr. Fantastic and his increased energy resistance as well as his pre-fight abilities. Basically, we are reducing the potency of damage over time debuffs that are placed on us and increasing the potency with the ones that we are placing on opponent. So with the clapback node, whenever we are launching level 1 or level 2, when we are placing incinerates or shocks on opponent, we are placing the same debuff on ourselves thanks to clapback, but thanks to Mr. Fantastic's abilities, we are hardly taking any damage here. We can see that incinerate is ticking for 24, but obviously willpower is healing us more, so he basically has a lot of inbuilt heal thanks to this clapback node. And cornered typically is also extremely helpful here, because with Mr. Fantastic's abilities we can reduce the amount of power that opponents are getting whilst we are striking them, but we also want to abuse the power stings that we are gaining from Mr. Fantastic's synergy. Plus Mr. Fantastic benefits a lot if you can bait out multiple special attacks and get careful study passives and increase his abilities further. And in this case, that cornered node actually helps us to push opponents to whichever special attack we want them to use, and it quite often simply enables me to get both of the careful study passives if I choose to do so. And the main kind of like bit of damage that we are actually able to do here comes from two different sources. First source is obviously the Mr. Fantastic passive damage based on amount of debuffs opponents have on them, and that is not reduced by Special Connoisseur node. So basically he kind of works like a Void, where there is going to be some damage over time ticking on the opponents throughout the entire fight. Now, it doesn't make for the fastest fights, but as we can see that the fights are quite smooth, and this Ebony Maw is actually one of the trickier fights of the lane, so I had to be a bit careful to play around the falters. But now that we have, I can basically just focus on finishing out these fights properly and starting to stack my debuffs on and dealing as much damage as I can. And the second most important way of dealing damage is the power stings, because the power stings also do not get affected by Special Connoisseur node. So whenever we place debuffs on the opponents, they gain these power stings, and whenever they throw special attacks, they take a decent chunk of damage every single time. So this whole passive damage over time plus the power sting damage effectively enables Mr. Fantastic to finish out these fights quite consistently and quite easily, and that combined with the willpower heal that we are getting thanks to clapback node whenever we are inflicting shock or incinerate on our opponents lets me keep the health topped up, and basically for the vast majority of the fights Mr. Fantastic pretty much solo the entire lane. This is a voiceover from a clip during the stream where I'm trying to explore 6.4 completely itemless. And this was one of the kind of trickier lanes to do itemless in 6.4.2. And after a couple of failed runs, I pulled myself together and we managed to actually squeeze through. Now this video is going to be showcasing Mr. Fantastic and I think one fight with Human Torch doing the entire lane, and then I will also upload separate videos for the fight against Man-Thing mini-boss, because I used a bit different strategy there with Thing. And then we're also going to have a really cool final boss fight against that Thor Ragnarok, where Mr. Fantastic absolutely shreds into him. But here we can see how he does against all this different variety of opponents, consistently managing to get his health topped up, and it just works out really well. Thanks to increased debuff duration, you can land more hits under parry stun as well, so bypassing Spider-Gwen's away is a very simple feat. And here we can see again that we are taking very little damage already, even though we only have 2 sets of debuffs. We're taking 41 damage from that shock that's placed on us due to clapback, but we're healing for 128. And when we are going to get this third row of pre-fight ability debuffs, we're going to take even less damage. And then basically every time we place a shock or incinerate on Spider-Gwen, we get 1 back and we just carry on healing. Now if I want to finish out the fights quicker, then I can push myself to level 3, and at that point your passive damage over time increases by quite a large amount thanks to that fury you get from level 3, and all of this damage scales with the current attack of Mr. Fantastic. So we saw there that with all 3 stacks of pre-fight debuffs active, for instance this Incinerate is dealing 25 damage whilst I'm healing for 127. So effectively I'm healing 100 health every half a second whilst these debuffs are active, so I can mitigate all my chip damage, I can recover my mistakes where I made them, and this strategy pretty much very nicely enabled me to complete this line completely item free, using nothing more than a full Fantastic Four team. And overall I definitely must say I was quite happy how all of these interactions worked out. It just seemed that everything seemingly comes together extremely well, starting from the way Mr. Fantastic can utilize that corner node to push opponents to whichever special attacks I want them to go, because other than that they don't really gain much power, and this way I can dictate how often and which special attacks my opponents are throwing, and that's super helpful in the fight because I can collect my careful study debuffs if I want. And obviously all of this passive damage let me deal enough damage to make these fights go by quite quickly. And willpower heal keeps me topped up, and all of these evade chants that Mr. Fantastic has also kind of like saves me from some mistakes. And yeah, here I was kind of debating a bit which champion to use and answering some couple of questions in the chat, so I fast forwarded through it. I decided to go in with Human Torch and pre-fight ability active, because again Human Torch's Nova Flames are passive damage, so they bypass this entire special Connoisseur node altogether, plus they also are not considered as damage over time debuff, so you bypass the cornered, and they still work extremely well. Obviously I will end up making a mistake here, and unfortunately I will end up dying just before I can finish out the fight. But here you can certainly see that Human Torch is putting in some very serious work, and he's also a quite good option for this lane altogether, because if you manage to get to Nova Flames, even without pre-fight ability active, you're going to be dealing your regular amount of damage with them. There are multiple champions where you would be able to gain plenty of smolders as well, so that's definitely useful. But here you can see that I accidentally ate a level 1, so I got the debuff on me. Currently I have 2 debuffs, so I'm like really rushing to get them off. I'm trying to salvage this fight, and I still have currently 1 debuff, but the timer is about to play the second one on me, so I'm gonna go to another level 1. I get the debuff off, but I'm having the next one pretty much immediately get placed on me, and that passive damage just here barely but finishes me off before I have a chance to finish the void. But I just brought in Mr. Fantastic to finish off the fight, so it wasn't anything too tricky there. I could have used Mr. Fantastic for that fight, but I just felt it was a bit more risky than using a champion that I will not rely on as much for rest of these fights. So now we're up against Ghost. Ghost is going to be a very kind of like easy, simple fight as well. So I will in fact speed this fight up a bit so we can sit through the more difficult one, which is going to be a thing. And here we can see again that our plan is working perfectly fine. We are getting our stacks of debuffs. We are healing from willpower. We are gonna be using our special attacks. I'm pushing Ghost to level 2 now to get my second set of Careful Study debuffs to even further enhance my power gain. And unless the damage over time debuff is currently active, we can see that Ghost is hardly gaining any power. Mr. Fantastic is doing his thing, so that's like one of the greatest things about Mr. Fantastic is that he is an incredible utility machine when all of Fantastic Four comes together. My probably biggest criticism on the character design would be that he's quite extensively reliant on the rest of the Fantastic Four synergy, so that is probably preventing him from shining a lot more in many different situations. But most of the Fantastic Four synergy members are great champions within themselves, so it's not like he's synergizing with Yellow Jackets and Ant-Mans and Iron Patriots and Groots. He actually makes you bring in other good champions in the team, so that quite often is a price that you can pay, because these champions can put in work in different fights as well. It's just kind of like a matter of circumstances falling in line. So now next we are going to be up against Beast. Now against Beast, not many people know this, I feel, but you want to bait out his level 1s, because if you do bait out his level 2, he switches to his defensive stance, which quite extensively increases his defensive capabilities, critical resistance, and basically he becomes a lot more tankier. So if you are interested in taking Beast down quickly, you want to make sure he's staying in his offensive stance, which he's basically re-triggering with his level 1s. So it's kind of important to try and make sure that Beast stays in his offensive stance as much as possible, otherwise he becomes a lot more tankier. But yeah, so here we can see that we have 3 sets of these debuffs active once again. We're just farming our heavy attacks to refresh them. I think I'm going for level 3 in this one, don't exactly remember, but all of this passive damage over time obviously is adding up as well, based on the number of debuffs that we have active. So here I'm going for level 3. That level 3 Fury will increase my attack, but that's not the main point. The main point is because passive damage over time scales with my current attack, so we're going to see that the numbers get extensively larger at this point. Now what I would have to do ideally is get to a level 1 before that Fury expires to place even more debuffs on him, and that will let me do even more damage over time. But even at this point he's ticking for well over 1000 there, 1200, so it's working out quite well. Fortunately the Fury didn't stay active there for quite long enough, but I'm going to drop my level 2 just to get that shock debuff back on me so I can get some willpower heal. And yeah, we can see that the Beast slowly but surely has basically dwindled down thanks to the power stings, thanks to the passive damage that we are dealing to him every single second of the fight. So I'm going to drop another level 1, get even more debuffs, increase the amount he is ticking down for, and kind of like speeding up the fight. Obviously getting that Incinerate on me, healing by it quite well, and the fight is pretty much over. Now the next fight's gonna be arguably one of the more trickier fights on this lane outside of like the mini boss and maybe Ebony Maw. Ebony Maw was definitely a tricky fight as well to avoid the degens and all that stuff, and he was like tricky to parry. So Here we are going to be going up against the Thing. Against the Thing, I only activated 2 of my 3 pre-fight ability debuffs because I wanted to make sure that the Thing's power gain is not obstructed in any way, so I can make sure that I can always bait out the special attack when I need it. Basically when he's at 15 rock stacks. So I did not want anything to prevent Thing from gaining power in this fight at all whatsoever, and that was basically mainly done so I can make sure that I can always bait out the special attacks when he reaches the 15 charges. Also, thankfully, Mr. Fantastic's heavy attack is only a single hit, so pretty much at any kind of like configuration I can push the Thing to special attacks, even if he throws a special attack whilst he was on like 13 charges or something like that, with a couple of heavy attacks and a couple of hits in block. Typically it always works out quite well for me. Now, because I do not have the 3rd pre-fight ability debuff active, obviously I'm dealing less damage over time, and my power things are also dealing a bit less damage because my attack is based on the number of debuffs I have currently on opponent. So it is a small sacrifice in the damage output, but at the same time I just felt that it made this fight quite a bit more easier. So there, unfortunately, my debuffs expired, so I need to go back and restack all of them up using my level 2s. So this fight is taking a bit longer, but at the same time, at no given point, I'm kind of like cornered or pressured. I feel that the fight is under control, and that is the thing that Mr. Fantastic excels in. I don't think he gets enough credit in that department, because he might not be the most explosive, high damage output champion in the game, but not everybody has to be. But he has very unique ways how to control the fight, how to control opponent's power, how to control the pacing of the fight. You have multiple strategies available which you can use, which pre-fight abilities are the most important ones, which might hinder you, so you can select and pick in between them. You can choose whether to go for your like level 1s, 2s or 3s and work with a big passive fury, more debuffs or more pre-fight ability debuffs. So it all in all is a very kind of like large amount of options for Mr. Fantastic. That's why I personally do like him as a character quite a bit. And now we're going to be going up against Electro, which is going to be the last fight in this video. And Electro fight is also quite worthwhile to mention, because you'd think that Mr. Fantastic doesn't really have anything going on against Electro, because I have no defensive ability accuracy reduction here, and I cannot bypass the damage back that Electro is dealing to me. But keep in mind, my actual hits only deal 10% of the damage than normally would. So the damage I'm receiving back is based on the damage I'm dealing with my hits to Electro. So effectively, I get that Electro damage back for a very, very small amount. And I can easily mitigate that with these willpower heals from the shocks and incinerates I place on Electro. Now obviously Electro is basically kind of pseudo shock immune and he takes no damage from the shock, but that's kind of not the point. I'm still going to use my level 2s initially to get my debuffs going, get my willpower heal going, and then I'm going to switch to level 1s obviously, because those actually can deal some damage. But yeah, so here we can see that I'm well within like third of the fight. We have managed to get off a third of Electro's health, but my health is still remaining up there. I'm still healthy. I don't have too much to worry about, because all and damage that I'm taking from Electro from striking him is basically mitigated by these willpower heals. So I figured that is also a very interesting interaction to showcase in this case, where that special Connoisseur node is actually kind of working against Electro very extensively, because I cannot deal a lot of damage to my hits, so I cannot take a lot of damage back, and thanks to that I can just rely on all of these damage over time effects and powers things to actually take down this guy. Now if it wouldn't be for special Connoisseur node right now, right here in this lane, Mr. Fantastic would have a lot harder time dealing with this Electro, and Mr. Fantastic in all likelihood would not be able to solo this fight. So this is a very kind of like ironic example of sometimes a very punishing, very challenging node can end up being the very sole reason why you are able to use a champion in a particular way and deal with the fights you otherwise might not have been able to deal with. So yeah, I found it extremely interesting. But since this is the last fight of the video, I will not keep you guys here for too much longer. I feel that the video is quite long as it is, but I wanted to showcase how he ran through the entire lane basically by himself, so I did find that quite impressive. And hopefully so will you guys. And if you like today's video, then definitely hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit all the buttons. And yeah, I have a couple more videos to upload today. So hopefully I'm gonna see you guys soon. Laters.